We are starting the book of Ruth. And this is an unusual book because it talks about the life of a lady by the name of Ruth. Ruth is a very unusual name. So let me just begin by giving you her name. Her name is Ruth, and it spells this way: R-U-T-H. And so it's pronounced as R-U, Ruth, and then a T. But the T actually ends softly with a H. So it's pronounced as Ruth. Ruth. Not the English name Ruth, but the Hebrew name is Ruth. So you have a TH at the back. So this is the book of Ruth. But in chapter 1, as we go along, we need to have a little bit of a background because we need to understand the times and the environment and what is happening at this point in time when the book of Ruth is spoken about. And we get this from verse 1. Now, verse 1 says, "It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled." When the judges ruled, it was after the time of Joshua, but before the kings. So from here you can already tell it is after Joshua, meaning they have already gone into the promised land. And then we have the judges, and then we have the kings. And by kings, we are talking about 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. That would be the time when the Israelites asked for a king. And so Ruth will be somewhere in this period. Right? In this period, you get Ruth. And so that is the kind of idea that we have in terms of its background. So the books would be, Joshua would be here. The book of Judges. And the book of 1 and 2 Samuel. So who would you know in the book of Judges? You would find the character of Deborah. She was one of the lady judges and she ruled. You find the story of Samson in the book of Judges. You would also find towards the end of the book of Judges, we would speak of Samuel, who lived right at the tail end of the period of Judges. Because it was during the time of Samuel that the kings were installed. The first king being Saul. So this is how we would understand verse 1. Came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was famine in the land. And with the land, it is the promised land. Right? Every time you read land, it has to do with the land that God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not any other land. So that is how we would read this. Famine would mean there's no food, which most of the time refer to drought. Drought means no rain, no water, and no water, no crops, no harvest, no food. So there was a famine. You recall that there were a number of famines that happened in this land. Much earlier would be in the days of Abraham in chapter 12. Then you find also in the time of Isaac, and then also in the time of Jacob towards the end of his life, when towards the end of the book of Genesis, where he moves his entire family to Egypt. And that was part of the 7-year famine that Pharaoh had dreamt. And so famine is a common thing in that part of the world. And when there is famine, sometimes it is just localized famine, which means that when you move away, you will always come to a place where you can still survive. And so during the time of Jacob, at the end of the book of Genesis, it was a major famine, which means that there was no other way for the entire area to find food. But because Joseph was in the good books of Pharaoh, and he was able to interpret the dream of Pharaoh, where there were 7 years of fat and 7 years of lean. And it was in the 7 years of lean, probably in the 3rd year, that Joseph actually went into Egypt. So in the time of Jacob, it was massive famine. But in this part of Ruth chapter 1, it is not a massive famine like the days of Jacob. It would be a more localized famine, very much in the promised land. And so what happened was this. In verse 1, we find that this certain man of Bethlehem, which means that this person that we are going to find out, his name is Elimelech, right? Elimelech. We'll talk about him shortly. He was from Bethlehem of Judah, which means that it would be a town in the territory or the land that Judah or the descendants of Judah had inherited. In this case, this would be Bethlehem. And he went to the country of Moab. So he moved out from Bethlehem of Yehudah and went to the country of Moab. That would be the time where in Genesis chapter 19, the daughters of Lot had children with Lot. One is Amnon and the other one is Moab. And so this would be the descendants of Lot in the country of Moab. So he and his wife and his 2 sons moved from Bethlehem to Moab. So you need to understand that they are just neighboring countries. And Bethlehem, when you travel east, you would come to the Dead Sea and or the Salt Sea then. And then you have the Jordan River that comes north to south into the Salt Sea. And so Moab would be the land that you crossed the Jordan. And that would be, well, today's Jordan. That whole area there is called Moab. And south of it will be the Ammon. There we get the Ammonites. So the 2 brothers, Moab and Ammon, would be north and south of each other. And this would be the territory of the children of Lot. And so now we have this man by the name of Elimelech. Elimelech means my God is the king, right? My God is the king. So you can see that Eli is my God. Melech is king. So my God is king, or my God is the king, or the king is my God. These are all permutations. So this man who went from Bethlehem to Moab is called Elimelech. His wife was Naomi, or Naomi. We call it this way, Naomi. And Naomi actually means very delightful, right? Very delightful. Very pleasant. You could also see that this name talks about beauty and favor. right? Beauty and favor. So Naomi's name is a very nice name. And then there were two sons. He had two sons named Mahlon and Chilion. Now, how do you pronounce this? Mahlon? Mahlon actually is the first son, and Mahlon means sick. The second son is Kilion. You can pronounce it as Kilion, right? Kilion. Kilion means pining. Pining, and basically to long for, right? So there were two sons, Mahlon and Kilion. They were Ephratites of Bethlehem, Yehuda. And so you find that these were Ephratites. What is an Ephratite? You need to know that Ephratite comes from Ephraim. And Ephraim, as you know, is a brother of Manasseh. The two are sons of Joseph. And so Ephraim is actually north of Judah. But now we find that they live in Bethlehem, in Judah, and they are called Ephratites, or inhabitants or descendants of Ephraim. So this certain man of Bethlehem is Elimelech with his two sons. And somehow the two sons were Ephratites of Yehuda. And they went, all of them went to the country of Moab, and they stayed there. Now what essentially happens now that we can see is that Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and then she had her two sons left. And the two sons each took wives of the women of Moab. The first one was Orpah. The second one was Ruth. So just remember right now that these are women of Moab. Now, remember, as a rule, they are not supposed to marry women of Canaan or the Canaanite women. So Moab is not a Canaanite. So it is okay for the two sons to marry Moabites. And after the father died, they got married and they lived there for about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Kilion also died. And this is a sad day where Naomi was the only survivor. Her sons died and her husband died. And so that is the whole story in chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. So it begins as a very quick introduction that why they actually left Bethlehem and went to Moab. At the end of the day, by verse 5, the story is all died, except Naomi. Now we find the story moving forward. In verse 6, she then wanted to return from Moab. Why? Was because she heard that God had been giving his people bread, which means that the promised land now have food to eat. Now notice all these statements that God had visited I mean, we cannot be thinking that God rained food from heaven or done anything. So it is likely that the water has come back and the crops are growing. And so there is food back in where she came from. And so she said, well, it's time for us to leave Moab. And so she spoke to the daughters-in-law, which would be the wives of her two sons. And therefore, she went out from the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And then they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And so this is from Moab, and then going back to Judah. In verse 8, Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, you know what? One of the things that we need to deal with is this, that the two sons that she had were actually quite young. And marrying the two women was only for about 10 years. For some reason, the two died. Now, if you look at it that way, we would see that Ruth is likely to be in the region of maybe in her late 20s and early 30s at the worst case. And so if you think of Ruth and Orpah, they are both in the late 20s and you would call them very marriageable age. In the culture, you don't have a husband anymore. You can actually have another husband again because they are both very young in that sense. And so Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go back to your mother's house. You notice it doesn't go back to the father's house, but it is about the father as well. But you go back to your mother's house, meaning go home. Go home. And the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead, which means their husbands, and with me. And that the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. So the idea here is, this is a word of blessing. Okay. What is a blessing? Blessing is to say good things. Blessing is to say nice things. And so she is now pronouncing a blessing upon these two daughters-in-law, that God himself, Jehovah, will grant that you may find rest. Now notice, this is very interesting in verse 8 to talk about rest. Verse 9, right? The idea of rest is nuach. Nuach is the name of Noah, right? Is to find a resting place. So the house of the mother's house is not a resting place because it belongs to the father and mother. So remember, the rule of the marriage is that the man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his woman, and the two shall become one flesh. And so they find that when a man and a woman comes together, there is rest, meaning they are now having their own home. They are not dependent on the father and mother. They become the new father and mother. And that is a blessing. So marriage itself is a blessing where you can find a home that you can make your own, and each in the house of her man. Okay, that's what it means. And so basically it is to say that may you find a man of your own again, now that my sons have died, and you are young, and may God grant you that rest in the house of your husband. So that is a blessing. And Naomi blessed them and let them go free. So this is the idea. And in the end of verse 9 right here, she kissed them, and then they lifted up their voices and wept because they've been together for 10 years. And they said to her, surely we will return with you to your people. Notice, your people being Israel, the Israelites. Why? Because we here are the Moabites. Verse 11. Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Don't come with me. Why will you come with me? Are there still sons in my womb that may be your husbands? Basically, he's telling her that I cannot have any more children and you cannot marry any one of my children. I have no more. Right? And that is the idea. So turn back, my daughters, go, leave me. I am too old to have a husband. I cannot have children anymore. If I should say I have hope, or if I should have a husband tonight and should bear sons, are you going to wait? And that's the problem we have today. And so this is how Naomi had spoken to them. So it says, turn back, no sons in my womb that can be your husbands. Turn back, my daughters. Because Naomi treated the girls as her daughters. So principally is this. When a woman is married to a man, the mother has a new daughter. Right? Go, I'm too old to have a husband. If I should say, now notice if it is a hypothetical. Right? Hypothetical. Just to say now we can have that I have hope that I can have a husband tonight. And then I should bear sons. Are you going to wait for them till they are grown? This is an impossible thing. Don't follow me, you girls. Right? Would you restrain yourself from having husbands or having men? Why? Because now they are free. So she concludes, no, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Now, this is another strange thing. Earlier on, Naomi is saying that, well, God has brought food to the people. Now in verse 13, he says, the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. This is basically saying that God has done something to me. God has punished me. All right? So this is an invocation. And it's negative. It is not about a blessing. It is about a curse. That the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. I have no more husband. I have no more sons. So what do I have? Nothing. So you girls should just go away. That is the condition of Naomi's heart. That she also do not want to see these two young women, the daughters-in-law, to suffer like her. Now continue on in verse 14. They lifted their voices and wept again. So you could see the emotions around. Cannot leave each other. And that Orpah decided to kiss her mother-in-law. But Ruth clung to her. Now this is a word that we need to understand. The word clung to her is to cleave. Join to her. Where did we see this word? Well, the man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. That is the word, clung. To cling. To hold on to Naomi. And then verse 15 says this. See, look, your sister-in-law, Orpah, has gone back to her people, the Moabites, and to her gods. See, notice this? Her people, her gods. Her gods would be believing, I would say, also maybe Jehovah, maybe other gods, but it is definitely not how the Israel people would believe in God. And so Naomi said, just go, follow your sister-in-law. And this is what I want to show you in verse 16 onwards. is this particular word, to cling, right? To cling or to cleave. Because Ruth has decided to stay with Naomi. And now we will read these famous words in verse 16. So Ruth says this. This word entreat basically means this: do not meet me and leave me. That is what Ruth is saying, you know. Do not meet me so that I could leave you. Right? Maybe I could change this. Meet me so that I could leave you. This idea is very important because Ruth is saying, now that we are together, don't leave me. Or to turn back from following you. These two words, leave or turn back from following you, is actually meaning the same thing. When Naomi meets her and then leave her, the second part here, turn back from following after you, is the same. It's basically Naomi says, you should go away. Don't follow me. So go away and don't follow me are two ways of saying the same thing. Now, this is the famous words of Ruth. And we should look at this very carefully. He says, wherever you go, I will go. Meaning, where you walk, I will walk. Okay? And then, where you live, I will live. This means to where you are going to spend the night. Where are you going to stay? I will stay with you. If it's under the stars, so shall it be. That's what it means, right? So where you want to go, I will walk with you. Where you're going to put your head, I will put my head next to yours. If it's under the stars, so be it. Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will also be buried. The Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. These words represent cleave, cling, join. But this is a generic meaning, cleave, cling, and join. When Ruth said this to Naomi, she is not talking about marrying Naomi. So don't get me wrong, right? She is talking about becoming literally her daughter, part of her in her family that she doesn't have anymore. This is what these words mean. But when you say that you're going to be a daughter of Naomi, when you say you're going to cling to her, what essentially you're saying is that you are going to become her. Right? She is going to become an Israelite. She is going to become a follower of Jehovah. She's going to be buried in the promised land. And this will be till death. And so this relationship that Ruth is promising Naomi is for life. Meaning, she is going to be an Israelite for all intents and purposes. She's going to join the people. And everything the people do, Ruth will do. And so I think this is probably the first time we ever see a conversion of a Moabite to an Israelite. And in modern day terms, a Gentile becoming a Jew in that sense, right? So this is literally what it means. And the Jewish rabbis are very particular. They don't just let any Tom, Dick, and Harry become a Jew and follow them. They want people to have exactly the same interest, exactly the same attitude as Ruth before they would admit anyone to become a Jew, to join them to become a Jew, to pray and worship Jehovah and do everything that the Mosaic law does for them. That in itself, in this particular section, is literally a conversion of a Moabite to an Israelite. Now, in the discussion of Israelite, you need to remember that Israel is a nation. Israel is made up of 12 tribes. Israel is a religion because its faith is in Jehovah. And they practice all the commandments and laws that Jehovah has left with them through Moses. And so you will find that the belief system, the cultural system, as well as the nationhood are all stuck together. And so when Ruth says that I will join you, she is going to be part of Israel. From Moab, she is going to be joining and no longer a Moabite. Now, this is strange. Nationality you can change, faith you can change, and this has to do with culture. She also changed. Basically, she moved to become somebody else. That is what we mean. Now, do we have these things today? And I must say that these things do exist, even not in Judaism. If you say a family moves to North America, the children grows up in North America. They may look Chinese, but they speak like Matsali, right? They behave like them. They adopt their culture. They embrace everything North American. So they're literally North American. They have no more culture of yesterday. That is exactly what Ruth is doing, to be immersed into the people, the culture, the faith of everyone there. And so she becomes an Israelite for all intents and purposes. This is the key understanding of this passage here. Now in verse 18, when Naomi saw that Ruth was very determined. What is determined? She is strong in her mind, right? She is, I don't know, what else can we say that? She is hardened, okay? We can say that. Hardened, very determined. So this is a good word, determined. Strong-minded, determined that she will go with Naomi. She stopped speaking to her. It's not that she stopped speaking to her. She stopped trying to convince her otherwise, right? This is what it means. This is an idiom. It's not that Naomi stopped talking to Ruth. Naomi just stopped trying to convince her to leave, okay? Now from Moab, the two of them walked until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, the city was excited because of them. And the women of the city said, "Is this Naomi or Naomi?" So we'll pronounce it as Naomi, right? That also tells us a story that Naomi and her husband would have been very popular people at that point in time. Very famous and very well known. And so when they came back after so many years, they could still recognize Naomi. But this is what Naomi said: "Do not call me Naomi." Why? Remember, Naomi means delightful, pleasant, a woman of favor. Of favor. And she says, "Don't call me Naomi. Instead, call me Mara." Mara. What is Mara? Now, during the time of the travel in the wilderness, they came to the part of a place where they had water, but the water was bitter. And so they called the place Mara. Well, Mara means bitter. That's what Mara means. It means angry. It means discontented. No, any of these words will work. And so Naomi says, "Call me Mara." Why? Because God has dealt very bitterly with me. So in the heart of Naomi, she thinks that God has dealt with her in a way where it is just not right. Right? Why should she lose her husband and her 2 sons? She has nobody else. And technically, what do you call Naomi? Naomi is called a widow. You notice throughout the Bible, God always tells the Israelites, take care of the fatherless, the orphans, and the widows, those without husbands. So Naomi is a widow, and Naomi will need help. Naomi would need help. So she explained herself, "Call me Mara, for Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." Almighty here would be Shaddai, right? And then she explains, "I went out full and I came back empty. I had a full house, I came back with no house." So the idea here is, in the Hebrew culture, everything that they do not know how to explain, they put it on God. When there was food, God did it. When things went bad, God did it. And so in this case, things were bad for Naomi, God did it, right? So she says, "Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty, the Shaddai, has afflicted me?" And this is the word evil, right? Has done evil to me. So the idea that Naomi has is, she was happy to begin with. Now she is very sad. She was full, and now she is empty. And so she told the people, "I have nothing left. I really have nothing left." You need to understand the mind of Naomi. Although it's not said in many words, verse 20 and 21 are 2 verses that describe the same thing. She doesn't understand why these things happen, and she says God has dealt it to her, and it's not what she was looking for. That's what evil. Remember, evil is not moral evil. Evil is basically, in the eyes of a person who is speaking, that it is not functional. It is not doing what was intended. And so, obviously, Naomi never intended to come back empty-handed, but yet it has. So she places this squarely on God. Verse 22, Naomi returned to Bethlehem. Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, and returned from the country of Moab. Now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. This is where things will pick up in the next few chapters. But suffice for us to say that in the month of Aviv, which is the first month, this is the starting of the barley harvest. The month of Aviv is also the Passover period, right? This is also the month of Nisan. So Aviv is wave. And so the barley harvest is indicated. And this is probably in the month of March, April, when it starts to have an early harvest. And so that is where we end with chapter 1. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.